This is one of the most terrifying books that I have ever read, and not because it's dystopian, but because it feels real. This is not just fiction. This could very much well be our future. If we keep laughing at kicking of all these men in power like Trump and Elon Musk, this will be the future of women. Hello, my gorgeous readers. I hope you had a great weekend with this sunny weather. I definitely did. And today I want to bring you guys a review of a book that has completely shaken me to my core. This has revolutionized the way I see the world right now and the way I see politics. And it's The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. This book should be considered feminist theory, and let me tell you why. Starting with the basics, The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood is a story published in 1985, which is classified as dystopian fiction novel, and it follows the story of Offred, who is a woman that lives in the Republic of Gilead, which is a very totalitarian / militaristic state that overthrew the US government. In this story, the US government is overthrown by a very radical and religious group called the Sons of Jacob, whose main idea is to control the masses and to control reproduction. In this world, or like in this story, we see that due to radiation and environmental issues, the vast majority of women are infertile, and there is a very small percentage of the population who is still able to bear children, which are considered unnamed the handmaids. So obviously, as you might imagine, society completely shifts, and then we see again the resurface of the traditional nuclear family, where the man is the head of the household, or what we would call the commanders are the head of the household, and everyone around serves the commander. And there are different roles that people can fit into this nuclear family. So we have the wife, for example, which is the wives of the commanders, who are the second in charge, I would say, and are also women of high status. We also have the mothers, who are the maids or the traditional servants that we would see in high class households. We also have, I would say, the butlers. I don't really call them like, they don't really call them like that in the book, but that is how I would refer to them, which are basically men who deal with some sort of household stuff that is more manly, like working in the garden or being a chauffeur for the commander, for example. And then lastly, we have the handmaids, who are the women that bear the children. They are the women that are that create these rituals, or that are used for reproduction and for breeding only. Throughout the story as well, we get the opportunity to see more context of this state, or how this state became the Republic of Gilead. We get to see how Offred has this normal lifestyle as any woman of the West, or in Western societies, where they have a job, where she had her own bank account and her own resources, and then slowly but surely these resources are cut off, and then she becomes dependent of her husband. And we also get to see the indoctrination that she goes through after she is caught trying to exile or trying to leave the Republic, and how she goes through the indoctrination and re-education and reintroduction to the Republic of Gilead, and how they train her to be a handmaid and train her into these society standards. There are a lot more things that are happening in this story, which I definitely do not want to ruin. So I would just mention that there are 2 more roles that women can have, apart from being a wife, a mother, or a handmaid. And the 2 other roles are either a Jezebel or an aunt. So if you are an aunt, you are a woman who believes in these values, or in these expectations of society of the Republic of Gilead. So what you do is you teach women, you teach handmaids and wives into fitting into these standards and fitting into these values. And the other role that women have in this story is the role of Jezebel, which appears way later in the story, but the main point of a Jezebel is of a sex worker. I would say entertainer, because at the end of the day, they also do quite a lot of things to entertain the commanders, which are the only ones that have access to the Jezebels. But at the end of the day, what they actually do is sex work. About Offred specifically, who is the main character of the story, we first meet her in her third assignment as a handmaid, right? So she has been through this before. She has offered herself as a handmaid, as a womb to other families, and we first meet her when she is just when she has just newly moved to this new house, and we get to experience her relationship with all the characters in the house, so with the Marthas, for example, and with the butlers or the servants. And then we also see the relationship with the commander and the commander's wife, who is, well, her name is Serena Joy, and who is very, very bitter about the fact that she is here. And she finds herself in a very unique position of power because she is requested by the commander to see him outside the ceremony, which is a monthly ritualistic rape that is committed in order to ensure conception. And the fact that she is requested personally by the commander in order to see him and just spend some time together, that is something that gives her power over the wife, obviously, because she is acting as the wife or as a companion instead of Serena Joy, and also puts her in a position of danger because this is strictly forbidden. According to the sons of Jacob, women or handmaids can only be seen as the role as they have, which is the role of womb. Overall, the main idea of the book is to see how easy it is for society to revoke women's freedom and the right to choose under the pretext of religion and conservatism, which is actually fueled by fatalism and overall mass hysteria and desire of control, not only of society overall, but also of reproduction and mass control. In my opinion, this book is truly a masterpiece, not only because of how creative the plot is, but also because how terrifyingly close to this dream ideal of society we see within the far-right movements, right? And also at the same time, it shows how the reality of such regime would be for both men and women, right? This book not only shows how much women would suffer under such regime, but also how men would suffer under this societal change, and how it actually would be quite shit for them as well. And more specifically, this is something that I also see every day with patriarchy, right? And I would say that this book has a lot of correlations between what happens in the story, what is the reality in this, behind this ideal, and also what happens nowadays in patriarchy, right? So for example, if we dig into the narrative of the book, right, men are sold this idea that they will be one of these sons of Jacob, right? That they will have these harem of women that are actually there for everything that they desire, right? Which is sex. Obviously, you have the Jezebels, you have a maid, which are the Marthas, you have a wife who is the companion, and then you have the handmaid who is the womb, right? So you have like this ideal of multiple women, or like a harem that you control and that you have full power on, right? Like this is the ideal that we see in the Republic of Gilead, right? Which at the end of the day, that's not something that actually happens in the book, because only a small amount of people, or like a very small percentage of men, have these sort of resources and this sort of access, right? We see that in reality, the vast majority of men that we see in the Republic are actually servants and chauffeurs for the commanders, right? Or they have natural regular jobs, and they have the econo wives, right? Which is what happens every day as well. So I think they are first sold the idea of, oh, you are gonna be like, you are going to have this power over women, so therefore you have the power to control, and you have everything available for you. Which is exactly what I see in Luke, which is Offred's husband before the Republic of Gilead is installed, right? I first see how after the coup and after the US government is overthrown, I see how he doesn't really pay much attention to what is happening around him, or like what is happening to Offred, because he doesn't put the emphasis, or he doesn't think that that is something that will affect him directly, right? So when he sees that she loses a job and that she doesn't have any opportunity to become fully independent or take care of herself without him, he immediately steps up and says, don't worry, I have you covered, right? But then once things start getting even more serious, right, like once things are above his own mindset of controlling and having Offred depending on him, then it's when he actually decides to exile, right? It's under his own pretext, or like under his own rules and decision to leave, right? Offred is always the second in command, right? She is the wife, and Luke is the one that takes control over the decisions. That's why at first he doesn't really care, or like he doesn't seem to actually put emphasis into Offred losing her own freedom, because that benefits him. But then once he realizes that he will also lose his independence, that is when they decide to exile as a couple and as a family. But then it is too late for Offred, and then she is reintroduced as a handmaid. And when we first met the commander, at first I thought he was the kind of person, or like the kind of guy that was forced into it because he has the power, right? That is the vibe that I got from the start. We see it in the way that he performs the ceremony, or the way that he acts with his wife and with everyone around him. He seems to be very much disengaged with everything that is happening in the household, which is probably makes sense because you have Serena Joy as a wife who is extremely controlling, right? But then the more I read the book and the more I got to learn about the commander, it just made me realize that actually he wasn't disengaged, he just doesn't care, right? Because he is the kind of guy that was into these things, and like was into having this sort of harem that was actually supporting him, and he had all this attention from all different women, right? We see that he explicitly wants this kind of life, but the problem is that this life that he so much desires and that he agrees with doesn't actually give him what he needs or what he thinks he deserves, which is companionship, which is love and attention. Because this is exactly what happens with patriarchy as well, and within our society, right? Because the commanders and all the men in the Republic of Gilead are sold this ideal of controlling women and having full power and full control, but then the reality is not actually what they expected. And that's exactly how patriarchal fantasies pan out, right? They never work. For example, for middle-class men like Nick and Luke, they have this idea that they will be able to sort of control their wives or to control the women around them, but that is not actually what they receive. What they receive is slavery, and they are enslaved by the commanders, right? They find themselves that they have no company, they have no women, they have no power, no control whatsoever, right? They are just as any other regular woman. And then for the commanders, right, this idea of controlling women and having this harem sounds great in theory, but then when you put it into practice, they find themselves that the one thing they desire the most, or the second thing they desire the most, which is companionship, it has been lost forever. Because at the end of the day, the women that find themselves in this situation, either as a wife, as a mother, or as a handmaid, they find themselves imprisoned and enslaved. So there is no companionship that they can offer because they see the commanders as a warden. because the women have been stripped of their humanity, right? The Marthas are not women, they are cleaning machines. The wives are not wives, or they are not women, they are accessories that they can show around. The handmaids, they are not women, they are wombs, or they are incubators. And the Jezebels, they also are not women, they are sex dolls that they can use, right? So at the end of the day, what we find is that men that would actually benefit, or that technically they would benefit from this society, they never do, because the one thing that they want, which is companionship, because they find themselves utterly alone, they will never get the companionship. They will only get a friendly prisoner. Now, do you not see how scarily similar the Handmaid's Tale is with our actual Western society right now? Because if not, let me enlighten you, right? I was genuinely terrified when I started connecting the dots, right? So first, the story begins with a radical transformation in the US government, right? We see a huge coup d'etat where the US government is overthrown by these very radical religious extremist group called Sons of Jacob, right? And the ideology of this group is based on Christian nationalism, neo-feudalism, and also very entrenched misogyny. Does that not click to you? Because I genuinely think this is what the Trump look like. This is what the Trump administration looks to me as a European. Like, I see very, very clearly how Christian nationalists the Trump administration is, and conservatives in general. Like the Conservatives Party, the Conservatives Party in the US is one step, or like one tiny step away from being an Nazi party in Europe, right? They are extremely conservative. They are extremely nationalist, and also very, very much based on the Christian ideology. And also they are neo-feudalist. Like there is no other expression that I can use, right? Like, we are living under a society where, more especially in the US, right? I see how you have big corporations that owe everything around them, right? And then people, or like the natural middle and lower class, they just live under these under this regime, right? So for example, we have multi corporations like Amazon or McDonald's or any sort of fast food. They have all these like massive conglomerations where people that work into these corporations, they are under this regime. And this is straight up neo-feudalism, right? I would say that this resurgence of extremist ideologies started because of COVID-19, more specifically during the quarantining periods that we have all over the world, or that we had all over the world, right? I saw how isolation and lockdowns created the perfect environment for the far-right movements to slowly creep into our society, right? Because the main thing is that people were lonely, right? In general, we see an overall mass collective phenomenon of loneliness within our own society, right? We saw how the percentage of extreme loneliness raised from 6% to 21% in months of quarantining, right? So we saw how people were even more lonely than as usual, even though our society is already quite lonely in general. So we saw a huge resurgence of loneliness, which makes people desperate to connect with each other, right? To create communities. And this is where the far right movement enters in, right? Because obviously the far right tends to be very religious, and as humans we usually tend to go for religion when we are desperate or when we are in a bad place. I would say that this need for religion and this need for community created this sort of environment, like this sort of eternal soup of far right movements and communities and ideologies to integrate into society. Thanks to the internet and social media, we also have first row seats to see how these communities, these very extreme communities, are preying into younger generations, more specifically Gen Z, right? I won't say that this is this is an issue with the younger generations, because this is something that happens overall in all ages, but in all age ranges. But I would say more specifically, these communities cater to younger generations. That is why we see a rise in younger generations being more religious than usual, but also being more far right and more conservative, right? We see how these younger generations tend to be, I would say there is a higher percentage of people that consider themselves conservative rather than what it was in the past with millennials, with Gen X, for example. And in the US, this has been translated to a noticeable rise on conservative propaganda and also Christian nationalism, right? I see how values like purity, modesty, submission to God, submission to men, for example, is something that I see very much portrayed into social media, but also in art, in and politics as well. This is something very common that I never thought I would see ever again, right? And in other words, I would say these are the same exact doctrines that we see here, right? That is exactly how it started. It started as the sons of Jacob slowly crept into society as something temporal or something temporary that would help reinstigate society back to normal, but then slowly turns into control over women's freedom and right to choose, and then control over overall control to society. And this is not something that happens in the US only, right? I see in Europe as well the rise of national conservatism as well. I see, for example, Nigel Farage in the UK, Alice Weidel in Germany, Marine Le Pen in France, and then Santiago Abascal in Spain, in my home country, right? This is something that I see everywhere in the West. We see a huge rise of conservatism and nationalistic or Christian nationalistic propaganda everywhere in the world, or at least in the West. And I think that these movements are selling the same kind of story, right? It's not obviously they have their own differences based on cultural exceptions, but they usually have the same ideology, which is traditional lifestyle, or like the traditional nuclear family and protection of the said nuclear family, right? Which at the end of the day is, like, I would say it's a buzzword that far right movements use as a way to say we are doing all these policies to control women and to control the right to choose. But here is the catch, right? Right now in this society, or at least in the West, we as women have the opportunity to opt out of this fantasy, right? We still have the right to choose. And that is something that men, or these kind of men, don't agree with, right? They don't want us to have the option. They just want us to do what they want. They just want us to serve them. That is why there are so many men that are getting into these incel-like ideologies, and they go into the far-right movements, because they have been sold this fantasy, this idea that just because they are men, they deserve all these things, right? They have the power, they deserve to have the control, they deserve these great life that they are expected to have, right? And they will be shamed if they don't. So therefore, when they find themselves that they are nothing more than average, or they don't have the power to control women and to control what these women do to them and what they want, like what these men want them to do, then they find themselves scared, and they find themselves also filled with rage, because they realize that we as women still have the power to opt out of this fantasy that these men have of controlling us and to using us however they want. And this is the main gist of the story, right? Because they get this desperation and this rage, and they use it and they weaponize it as a way to fuel their own ideology, right, into society. And this is why we find the consequences right now, right? We see how conservative women who voted for Trump find themselves being imprisoned because they had a natural miscarriage, or we see how conservative immigrants are being deported by ICE because now all immigrants include them as well. And then lastly, we also see poor communities or people, impoverished people who find themselves like choking in debt because they have been they don't have access to healthcare because of safety nets like Obamacare, right? All these things have been removed, so therefore now they find themselves struggling back again. And this is the one thing that I always mention, and this is the main point of the story, right? If you take out the right to choose to women, you will take out the right to choose for everyone. It will affect everyone, no matter who you are. If you're white, if you are a man, if you are queer, whoever you are, if you take out the right to choose or the right of freedom to women, it will also affect you directly. Because if you take out the right to choose and if you strip people from their freedom, your freedom will also be affected, because the only people that will not be affected are the ones that are at the top, because they are the ones that control the status quo, and they are the only ones that have the power to bend the rules to their own necessities. You cannot bend the rules. So therefore, if you bend the rules for someone, or if you strip someone from their freedom and create rules in order to manipulate them and control them, at the end of the day, these rules will also control you in the future. So it doesn't matter what you think, it doesn't matter what you believe. Everyone should have the freedom to control their own lives and to be independent, no matter the decision that they take. Good Lord, I didn't expect to get this deep into the debate, but yeah, I hope that you guys understand where my mindset is coming from with The Handmaid's Tale. Obviously, I said it in the video and I say it again, this book is a masterpiece. Please make sure that you read this book. It's so good. And yeah, that is all for today, guys. If these books if you have read The Handmaid's Tale and it has shaken to your core, or even if it didn't, please make sure that you comment down below what you think about my review, or what do you think about the book in general. And yeah, I would love to hear your thoughts about the book, and about Margaret Atwood as well. I heard that she has some other books as well regarding the story, so I would love to read them as well. I have them on my TBR. And yeah, before you leave, obviously please comment down below, but I would love if you guys please subscribe and like my videos if you feel like it. And you can also follow me on my social media just right here. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you enjoyed the review, and I hope you have a great rest of your week, and I will see you soon. Until next time, I hope your coffee stays warm, your bookshelves stay full, and your stories keep hitting the spot. Keep reading even during the darkest hour. Bye.